Gnostic Road Show is my traveling version of Gnostic Boot Camp. Gnostic Boot Camp is a monthly seminar that I operate down in Los Angeles, where I'm from, which is a vehicle largely intended for the training of EGC clergy. It's been going for many, many years now. We meet once a month and cover every possible aspect of the Gnostic Mass, from examining the lives of the EGC saints, to talking about the symbolism of various aspects of the ritual, to just working our way painstakingly line by line through the ceremony, sometimes covering about a third of a page in a 2-hour evening. It takes us typically about 2 years of monthly meetings to get from the start of the Mass to the end of the Mass, at which time we have new people on board and we start again. It's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. It never ends. But Gnostic Road Show I initiated because I supervise clergy in a lot of different valleys, not just Los Angeles. And I pay very occasional visits to those places. And I wanted to come up with some way of sort of catching the essence of what comes out of Gnostic Boot Camp in a format that was suitable to do in, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever amount of time was available. And since then, it's morphed again into something that I presented in just various random valleys where the Lodge Master has the ill judgment to give me a form, such as, let's get this thing started. I'm a bishop. What does the word bishop mean? All right, what does a bishop do, say, in the Roman Catholic Church, where you're familiar with the term?
Consecrates people.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Pretty cushy job if that's all they do. Where is the word? I love etymology. Etymology will tell you so much about what a word really means. Here's a good one. Where does the word bishop come from? Anybody know? I'll take you through the first jump if nobody knows the first one, because you'll never guess it in a million years. This is a testimony to the power of the English language to take foreign terminology and chomp it into small pieces in unrecognizable form and spit it back out again. Because believe it or not, the word bishop is derived from the middle 2 syllables of the 4-syllable Greek word episkopos. You hear the piscop in there? That turned into bishop. That's the level of mangling of which English is capable. Yeah. So, episkopos. What does that mean?
Overseer.
Like similar to.
All right. You know more Greek than you think you do. Anybody reasonably literate, native speaker of English has untold wealth of Greek and Latin knowledge if they just give themselves permission to use analogy. So let's take the word apart and do its pieces. Epi and scopos. What words do you know that start with epi? What's the outside of your skin called?
Epidermis.
What's the point on the surface above the center of an earthquake called?
Epicenter.
So what can you say that epi probably means?
Upper.
Over, above, outside of, on top of. Scopos. What do you use to look at the moon through? What do you use to look at really small things through? What do these things have in common? Looking. So what does scopos mean? Seeing, looking. Overseer. That's all it means. Episkopos, overseer. That's all a bishop is, in the technical sense of the term, is an overseer. All right, now translate that word back into Latin rather than Greek. What is the Latin for above, on top of? Supervisor. Very good. Congratulations. So, the term supervising bishop, which is an official term of art in Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, is redundant. Our Grand Master has forbidden me from ever saying that to him again, but it doesn't apply to you. Sorry. So a bishop, like me, like Hank, like all the other bishops of our church, is nothing more and nothing less than an overseer of the church, which encompasses the roles that we were talking about earlier. It includes the consecration of clergy, the ordaining of clergy. It includes the supervision of the clergy, seeing that they are performing the Mass properly, training them in their roles. And as an extension of that supervisory role, my view is that includes teaching the laity. It includes offering information about our church to anyone who is interested in our mysteries, interested in how the Mass works, what its virtues might be, how it can be applied magically in their own lives. So that's why I'm here. This is part of my job as a bishop, to go around and have conversations like this with people, members of the clergy, non-members of the clergy, to basically bring out the ideas that make our Mass run. What is the engine of the Mass? Because Crowley didn't say very much about the Gnostic Mass and his career. There's very little in his accumulated diaries and letters that specifically talks about the Gnostic Mass. But one of the few things that he does say about it explicitly is quite a powerful statement. He describes it in Confessions as the central ritual of the OTO, public and private. We do a lot of rituals. We have our initiation rituals. We have the rituals that come down to us from the various magical traditions on which we draw. But he describes the Gnostic Mass, Liber 15, as being our central ritual, which gives it a certain amount of import. So why do we do it? What is the Gnostic Mass for? You have 10 seconds.
It's a magical ritual.
So people that don't know anything about the church are going to come see the naked lady?
There's certainly a certain amount of advertisement.
Advertisement.
Exactly. Well, it draws people in. I will not discount that as one level of how it operates. But that's only one level. What is
nourishment of the body of light?
Very good. In what sense do you mean that?
In what sense?
In what sense is it nourishment of the body of light?
In the sense that we're using the lower life to feed the higher with the Eucharistic communion.
That's an excellent way to put that. Anything else that it's for?
Am I allowed to guess?
Oh, encouraged. I am.
Okay. I said just in the notion that it's a central ritual or the central ritual, I would suggest that it's probably a summary of Thelemic philosophy.
It certainly is that. It is both a summary of Thelemic philosophy and of the OTO system in particular. The Gnostic Mass, in my experience, is a fractal. The closer you look, the more detail you find. There's a remarkable amount of encoded information in there. We'll be talking about some of that this evening. Anything else that the Mass is for? All right, I'll give you this one. It forms an egregore, a shared experience, a group consciousness is one way to put it. One of the best ways to form a group consciousness is to have people who are physically separated from one another performing the same ritual. Because in my experience, in my astral work, I find that rituals on the astral all happen in one temple. Anyone, anywhere doing a Star Ruby is doing it in some sense in the same place on the astral. And there is one astral temple of the Gnostic Mass, and all Masses happen there. And when we do the Mass in LA, and you guys do the Mass in Portland, and Elmha does it in Chicago, and they're doing it in Britain and Australia and all over the world, that same Mass is bonding us all. It is a shared community of both Malkuth of Asaya, both the material world and the higher planes above it, where we are all doing the same thing in the same way, using the same language and the same magical technologies, and it bonds us. It is in some sense the cement that glues the order together, which gives a very special meaning to the term central ritual of our order, public and private. It is, in one way, the bonding that pulls the order into a whole out of its many parts. So, all that says that the Mass is extremely important. But you talked about nourishing the body of light, and that's an important aspect of the Mass. The Catholics, the Roman Catholics, would tell you that their nourishment of the body of light, the communion of the Roman Catholic Church, is essential not merely for spiritual attainment, but for salvation. Is the Gnostic Mass essential for the performance of the great work? No, we don't make that same claim.
Aleister Crowley mentions the daily Eucharist, whether it's Gnostic Mass or a couple other types.
Right, exactly, in De Cultis. But that leads to an interesting question of what comprises a Eucharist, and I would agree that a practicing magician is well advised to observe a formal ritual Eucharistic sacrament every day, of whatever form it might be. But this is where it gets very interesting, because there's a line in our creed that is the only direct reference to the miracle of our Mass that you'll find in the text of the ritual. And forasmuch as meat and drink are transmuted in us daily into spiritual substance, I believe in the miracle of the Mass. I love the empiricism of Thelema. Because of this piece of evidence, I believe in this miracle. You're not going to find that in very many churches. What does that mean?
It means you digest food.
Meat and drink are transmuted in us daily into spiritual substance. And this is being spoken by members of the laity, members of the general public. It's not just aimed at the ritual magicians who might already be practicing an explicit ritual Eucharistic sacrament every day. This is saying that anyone who is being called on to recite this creed is already transforming spiritual substance in their bodies. They're transforming meat and drink into spiritual substance in their bodies every day. So then what's different about the Mass? Here's a question that I've been wrestling with for 20 years. What is qualitatively different between the host and the wine of the sacrament of the Gnostic Catholic Mass and a Whopper and a Coke?
Awareness.
Tell me about that.
Well, you're aware of the process that's going on and its connection to higher stuff.
Perfect. Brilliant. Anything else? Awareness is the first aspect. Consecration hits on what I consider to be the second aspect, which oddly enough is a term that I've borrowed from the Roman Catholic magical theory of communion, which is intention. You're both aware that this food is going to be transformed, and you are placing your magical intention, your magical focus on perfecting it as food for that purpose. It's the combination of those two elements that makes the result, in my view, quantitatively, but not qualitatively, different in nature from a Whopper and a Coke. The outcome of this is that, if this theory of things is correct, footnote, everything I'm saying tonight is my opinion as Craig Berry, unless I say it's a matter of EGC policy. If it's EGC policy, I'll stand up, salute, and then say it. Other than that, it's me rambling. Don't go off and say, well, Craig says it, and therefore HB must agree, and it's a matter of policy. No, I'll get in big trouble if that happens. Don't do that. But what would argue is that the only difference is intention and awareness between the Whopper and the Coke and the cake and the wine. That a magician of consummate skill and yogic intensity could walk into Burger King, order their meal, sit down, form that awareness and intention on that meal, and consume it with the same benefit as they would the outcome of the Gnostic Catholic Mass. Saying will over meat is a shorthand version of that clause from the Collects. It's basically micromass. It's forming the intention. What is your will? It is my will to eat and drink. To what end? That my body may be fortified thereby. To what end? That I may accomplish the great work. It's forming that awareness that this is going to be transformed. It's forming the intention that it be turned to spiritual ends, and then it is consumed. Will over meat turns every meal you do it on into an explicit Eucharist, whatever that meal might be. Now, the interesting thing that I found was that when I began taking will seriously, when I began doing that over meals, I found myself kind of shying away from eating at Burger King. Because when I thought about trying to turn that greasy ball into spiritual substance, I felt somewhat daunted. And maybe I better go get something a little bit healthier. It's funny how causation can run that way. But that, at least, is my position on the Mass, that it is not, as the Roman Catholics would say, the essential precursor to salvation, an essential element of any magician's career. Rather, you can think of it as being a kind of exploded diagram, an engineering model of how the process of transubstantiation, of the transformation of gross matter into the spiritual, is going on in you all the time. There's a meditation I like to do where I take a bite of something and swallow it, and a priestess carries it into my body on a paten and is met by a deacon who is holding the temple open. And they, in turn, bring in the power of the priest to begin the process of transforming that one bite of food into the spiritual substance. And that goes on with everything I swallow. Everything that goes into my body, there is a Mass team working in here to transform it. And what goes on in the Mass temple is, in some senses, just an externalization, almost like one of those, science diagrams where, you take it apart and all the pieces are on display so you can see how they relate to one another, even though that's not how they are in nature. The Mass is, in some senses, an exploded diagram of the process of spiritual digestion, of the process by which we transform gross matter into spiritual substance, of alchemy, in other words. And just like alchemy is operating on the external to change the internal. The Mass is an act of alchemy, and we'll talk about that also a little bit later on. Any questions so far, or interesting sidebars?
Just a comment that what you're saying is so interesting to me, because to me, the Mass is my little visit to the Grail Castle.
How so? That's interesting.
Well, in the Grail Castle, there is this whole procession that goes on, and there is the Grail passed around, and then there's the food passed around, and it's this magical place, and you're transformed in that place. And it's easy to live in that state in the Grail Castle and be one with everything. Then you leave, and you're trying to find your way back to it out there in the world.
Precisely.
And so the Mass gives you the Grail Castle to keep returning to.
The thing that I find most beautiful about the Parsifal myth is that at the very beginning of the story, he has the entire accomplished great work right in front of him, and he doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know how to recognize it. He doesn't know what question to ask. He doesn't know how this is to be applied, and he has to go through this very alchemical initiatory process before he can come back around and be in the same place partaking of the same substance, but now with awareness and intention so that he can perform the transformative act on it. If you have not read or watched Parsifal, that's your homework assignment, because it's all in there as much as it's all in the Mass. Anything else? All right, here's a fun one. The name of our church is Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, the Gnostic Catholic Church. Why is that the name of our church? Ecclesia, church. Are we a church? Churches have as one of their standout features the fact that they're congregational. A church is a community, a body of worshipers. And that, I think, is one important sense in which we are a church, is that we are a body. We worship as a group. Why do we do that? If you have a group of people who are all working the same path, working with the same energies, trying for the same goals, you can kind of cross-check one another. And if Bob is starting to act a little bit weird, his buddies can say, dude, you might want to modify the practices a bit. You seem to be kind of straying. And solo practitioners just go clear off over the nearest cliff. I've seen it happen far too often. So that communal aspect of the sort of shared group of researchers who are all sharing their results and correcting one another is very important. There's another aspect to it, too, I believe. Anyone want to hazard a guess? Maybe there's a third one I haven't thought of.
That we're doing Eucharistic ritual?
Okay, you can do Eucharistic ritual solo. Like Mass of the Phoenix, for example. Something as simple as probably going back to our ancestors who lived in trees. Something above us holds our attention. The alpha monkey sits highest in the tree in the troop, and looking up, you see the guy who's in charge. So we go into a particular receptive, focused, worshiping state when our heads are tilted upward. And notice where the stele is placed. Notice where the priestess is placed in the Mass. The things that are the focus of the ritual, the things that are highest are on the high altar, where everybody's head is tilted upward to see them, and thereby, just by psychomotor programming, reproduces a set of desirable changes in consciousness as a result. And the doing it in a group thing, who hasn't felt that shiver up your spine when a good, healthy, hearty congregation all hits a perfectly tuned ohm at the end of the creed? Anybody who does not lift a couple inches off the carpet at that point, check your heartbeat, because there are a few more reliable triggers for that exalted state. And you can't do that by yourself.
Hey.
So anyway, the secret of the 9th degree then is... I'm sorry.
So doesn't ecclesia mean assembly? Like just it means a group of people.
A congregation.
It's a descriptive.
Yeah.
So you're asking, why do we gather in groups? Is that
exactly? And also, why did he use the term ecclesia for us? Because the group nature of it is essential. But also, the term ecclesia, while originally it simply meant a gathering, has come. Each word of this is Crowley, in a sense, displaying his sense of humor on us. Because every one of these words is designed to trigger certain neuroses. Because ecclesia, church, is one of those words that many people coming to Thelema are trying to flee from. A lot of people have been scarred by backgrounds in one or another branch of one of the older forms of religion, and have a strong twitch trigger reaction at the idea of a church and at the idea of church ritual. And in my view, that word, ecclesia, which in the modern sense is universally associated with the concept of church. I mean, look at the Latin languages, Spanish, iglesia, it means church. That is a trigger. That is a challenge for people coming from a certain background who have to get past that, have to conquer that complex before they can happily participate in our church. Gnostica. Gnostic.
Knowing.
That's the root. That good old GN root in the Semitic languages. It's all about knowledge or knowing or experience. But what does it mean historically?
I've actually wondered about this because, it connotes ancient, arcane knowledge, but it really has very little to do historically with the Gnostic theology or metaphysics.
That's the first time somebody's stolen my thunder on that one. Congratulations. He'll be handling the rest of this. But no, seriously, that's the key to understanding Crowley's joke here, because we do partake of the core meaning of the word gnosis, which is direct spiritual experience. We don't want faith, we want knowledge. We don't want intercessors, we want directly to talk to God. We don't want to trust someone else's technology, we want to prove our own through success. That is the sense in which we are decidedly Gnostics. The historical Gnostics were characterized by those attitudes in combination with a set that are antithetical to everything we believe, such as the idea that we are prisoners of a dark creator god who was somehow cut off from the light of the pleroma and is basically keeping us as his little slaves and playthings, and that the idea is that matter is evil and the whole purpose of your life is to escape from it as quickly as possible. That somehow doesn't strike me as being especially compatible with Thelemic doctrine. Right? We are here because we chose to incarnate, because our work is here, because Malkuth of Messiah was the only place in which the tools and resources were available for us to accomplish our work. No one's here by accident. No one's here with the sole goal of being to escape from it. If your goal was to escape, you wouldn't have come. Listen to the last collect, the labor and heroism of incarnation. It's something you choose as what your next path will be after a life or an experience somewhere else. So again, this is Crowley tweaking us. He's choosing a word which is technically accurate and yet carries all this baggage which is exactly opposite in meaning to what he was intending to convey. Never underestimate Uncle Al's sense of humor. He is always messing with your mind. Anytime you read more than about 3 paragraphs of Crowley and think, oh, well, at least I understood that part, danger, because he's got something in on you somewhere in there. And then Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, the Gnostic Catholic Church. What does Catholic mean?
Universal.
Absolutely. That is the Latin sense of the term. What does it mean whenever anybody hears it? Roman Catholic. And again, in the cultural context he was coming from, anyone who heard the blah, blah, blah Catholic Church would immediately think of Roman Catholicism. And again, there is hardly anything in the world we are more spiritually antithetical to than the doctrines of Roman Catholicism, of fallen man and original sin and all of this cultural baggage. So what does he do? He slaps that label right on our name so that we're constantly having to overcome the twitch reaction that comes from being called Catholic, even though we are, in the sense of the technical Latinate sense of the word, Catholic. In any culturally relevant term, we're not. And so our name, Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, is a triple mind game that Crowley is playing with us every time we use the term to force us to overcome our preconceptions, to force us to get past our cultural baggage, get past the training we had as children, and to approach it on our own terms, with our own understanding. Pretty nice for just 3 words. You got to admire the man.
So why are we Catholic?
Excuse me, because we are universal. We say it. Thank you, I missed that. Thank you, because we are universal. We say that our message is for all mankind. Every man and every woman is a star. This book is to be translated into all tongues. We are not exclusive. That's another way in which we are somewhat different from the historical Gnostics. They tended to form very small, self-enclosed communities. We know what the hell's going on, and the rest of y'all can go fuck yourselves. That's not our way. We want to get our word out. We want to promulgate, within the restrictions that are mentioned in Chapter 3. But we do want to be visible, and we do want to bring everyone who's willing to come along to this self-knowledge and knowledge of God by the path we offer. So, yeah, good catch.
The law is for all.
The law is for all. Yes, exactly. Couldn't have put it better myself. All right. Let's talk about one of the really fun things that comes out of Gnostic Boot Camp is the discoveries we all make about little hidden bits, symbolism that's in the Mass and in plain sight once you see it, but you'd never have guessed it was there. And one of my favorites, I'll start off with, What's the very first thing that the priest says in this ritual?
I'm a man among
I am a man among men. I'm going to write down the initials of that phrase. Uh-huh. Yeah, when you start writing down initials, you're going down the rabbit hole.
Oh my goodness.
All right. Translate that into Hebrew, and we have Yod, Aleph, Aleph, Mem, Aleph, Mem. Right? With me so far? What's the value of Yod? Aleph? 1. Mem? 40. Another 1, and another 40. What does that add up to? 93.
Oh, we're so surprised.
So in other words, the very first thing that the priest says is 93. So that's level 1, and that was cool enough. But those of you who have studied some of the publicly available material on the AA might have already jumped ahead to notice something even cooler about this. If you try and derive the AA passwords from the publicly available materials, most solutions converge on each of them being of the form MA, 2 letters in the middle, which add up to 11, and AM, so that the whole thing ends up adding up to 93 for each of the passwords. So you have Mem, Aleph, Aleph Yod, Aleph Mem would be the 1 = 10 password. And then Mem, Aleph, Beit, Tet, Aleph Mem would be the 2 = 9, and so on up the system. Mem, Aleph, Aleph Yod, Aleph Mem. It's an AA password, just rearranged. The final Aleph Mem has been rotated. It's 2 AA passwords. Because the Yod and the Aleph, because we're scrambling it anyway, can be taken as coming in either order. So it could be 10 = 1, or it could be 1 = 10. So the priest, on exiting the tomb, is saying 3 things. First off, Thelema Agape 93, I'm a Thelemite. I'm a neophyte. I'm a man among men. I'm at the very bottom of the tree. I'm the Sisymus. I'm a 1 = 10. I'm at the very top of the tree. All in the seemingly innocuous, I am a man among men. Down south, we refer to the moments when you find things like this as brain squeegee moments, because the top of your head explodes, and then you have to find a squeegee and clean off the ceiling from all the brain fragments that have splattered up there. It's things like this that have convinced me over time that the Mass is a fractal. I went right past that line, looking at it in all the conventional ways. I'm a man among men. I'm just part of the congregation. I'm one of the people here. I'm symbolically speaking just a representative. Anyone here could be the person who is enacting this role of the priest. And that is very much there. That is a true understanding of what that line is about. And then one day, the trapdoor opens and this whole different set of levels comes into view. And suddenly, your understanding of the Mass is changed ever more, and you find yourself every incidental line in the Mass wondering, I wonder when that one's going to drop out from under me. I wonder what I'm going to find there. So any questions on that? Seriously, throw things in. Throw in your own, what things have you guys found before I give you another own of mine? What's your favorite Mass discovery? I'm not looking at anyone in particular.
That the priestess is the solar phallus on the altar.
Okay, tell me about that. How does that work?
Well, the priest invokes her when he goes up to on the final step and says, "Thou that art one, our Lord in the universe, the Son, our Lord and ourselves, whose name is mystery of mystery, uttermost being, etc., etc."
Right.
Appear thou glorious upon the throne of the Son.
Exactly. Who's the thou there? Yes. That's a very fascinating one. So, yeah, if you follow through that logic, if he's addressing, appear thou glorious upon the throne of the Son, who's about to appear on a throne of the Son? It's the priestess who's revealed there, and yet she's being addressed in these very phallic terms. Our Lord in the universe, the Son, our Lord and ourselves, whose name is mystery of mystery. And that is one of the central things you'll find in the Mass, is that the sort of gender and active-passive roles flip back and forth between the priest and the priestess in this fascinating dance. It is not a single polarity.
Thanks to Craig Berry for this lecture. Check back next episode for the second installment of the Gnostic Road Show.